To his co-workers, he was a nice guy. To his Boy Scout troop, he was a trusted leader. Until something snapped and led to shocking act of violence number 13, the Atlanta day trader murders. 44-year-old Mark Barton was a day trader looking for a fast track to fortune. But the market was not kind to Barton. Alltech Investment Group was the second firm in Atlanta to revoke his trading privileges.
He had put in about $50,000 initially with us. He went through all of that money, came back in and replenished his account, so to speak, and over the next few months went through that money as well.
He hated the people, he said, that had basically come to cause his destructive end and ruin, and he was out to get revenge.
On July 29, 1999, Barton showed up at the Atlanta offices of Momentum Securities, the first company that shut him off.
Found the manager of the office and started with him, shot and killed him, and then went around the office basically taking aim at anybody and everybody.
But Mark Barton was just getting started. Alltech was right across the street from the scene of Barton's first shooting spree. Office manager Brent Doonan was in the conference room when Barton arrived.
He opened the door, poked his head in, and said with a smile on his face, "Come here, you're gonna love this." I excused myself from the meeting, and at that point he pulled up his shirt, pulled out 2 guns, and just started shooting. The first shot hit me right in the chest, the second one in my right arm, collapsed me to the floor.
And then turned around and walked out the big long day trading table and just started going down the line, just shooting one after another after another.
Wounded but still conscious, Doonan fought back.
He was taking aim at one of our traders, Nell. She was about 4 feet from him, and he had the gun aimed right at her head. And when I hit him, knocked him off balance just enough that the bullet missed her and hit her computer screen instead. He was able to shoot me 3 more times in the back and in the arm. Then I made my escape down the hallway to a service elevator.
By the time Brent Doonan was wounded, police and SWAT teams arrived at the scene of the first shooting. Barton managed to elude police.
Thus far, we have 9 confirmed fatalities. The person that's been identified as the perpetrator is Mark O. Barton.
Barton was on the run. He didn't get far. At around 7:45 p.m., police cornered Barton's minivan at a gas station. Barton put his Colt .45 against his temple and fired. But the grisly story wasn't over. Later that evening at Barton's home in Stockbridge, Georgia, police found the bodies of his wife and 2 children. Barton killed them with a hammer 2 days before his workplace rampage. All told, Mark Barton killed 12 people, including his wife and children.
Once you go back and you look at the research on this guy, it starts to sink in that this was a very mentally ill person that, the rest of society didn't really pinpoint. I certainly never saw it.
The shooting stunned the nation. But just 4 days after the tragedy, Alltech reopened for business.
So we had a crisis management firm that was right above us. They came in immediately after the shooting. We're basically in charge of doing some of the counseling to help our traders kind of cope with what had happened.
I sat down with them personally and said, let's talk about, what you can expect. Before you know it, everybody's kind of going over, checking out what the stocks are doing and how their stocks have been, and we got them right back to work.
Brent Doonan spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering from his injuries. On September 29th, he too returned to work.
Over the course of the surgeries, they ended up taking a portion of my left lung, 1/3 of my liver, part of my diaphragm, my spleen, and a rib. But everything else is still kicking so far.
In 2006, Brent wrote a book about the horrible events of that July day in 1999.
You can hit rock bottom, and you can pick up the pieces and move on, and ultimately, to me anyway, this is a story of living. A rustic Scottish town, 29 school children,
4 loaded handguns, 1 deranged man. Shocking act of violence number 12 is the Dunblane Primary School shooting.
2005, there were 23 gun murders in Great Britain total. We have 32 a day in the United States.
The relative lack of gun violence in the UK makes the events of March 13, 1996, even harder to comprehend. At 9:25 a.m., a 43-year-old former scout leader named Thomas Hamilton entered the Dunblane Primary School in Dunblane, Scotland.
He was carrying 4 handguns. 3 of them were 9mm semi-automatic, and another was a revolver.
Hamilton made his way to the gymnasium.
Mr. Hamilton thought that the assembly began at 9:30. His plan was to go into the room where the assembly was being held and simply massacre her.
But there was no assembly. Instead, Hamilton found 3 teachers and 29 5- and 6-year-olds preparing for physical education class. Without a word, he opened fire. 44-year-old teacher Gwen Mayer tried to shield students with her body. She was one of the first to die.
There were 2 other teachers present, and they ushered the children, tried to get as many of them as they could into this storage room where they were told to lie down.
Children screamed and ran. Hamilton chased them down, firing as he went.
It was a combination of wild shooting and very deliberate target shooting.
16 first graders and 1 teacher were killed. 12 more students and 2 teachers were seriously wounded. In the end, Hamilton turned the gun on himself. When authorities searched Hamilton's home, they found evidence of a consuming obsession.
I don't think it would be a stretch to say that he had an unhealthy interest in young boys.
Several theories surfaced about Hamilton's motives that fateful day.
He felt victimized because for so many years he had been denied permission to start his boys' clubs.
Hamilton grew increasingly enraged, and as a result, he decided to exact revenge.
There is no more powerful way to exact vengeance against one's tormentors than by killing their children.
After the shootings, an outraged nation persuaded the House of Commons to ban handguns over .22 caliber. Great Britain now has some of the strictest gun control laws in the world.
I think it's amazing that in Britain, after a tragedy occurs, they took steps to prevent them from occurring again in the future. And that's what we don't do in the United States.
The gym where the massacre took place was torn down the following month, and within 2 years, the entire Dunblane Primary School was rebuilt.
They wanted all signs of that event to be removed. That school had become a place of horror.
A memorial to the 16 slain students and their teachers stands in a nearby cemetery. When we return, a horrific last meal.